Hey, Will.
What's up, Tim?
Today we did a nuclear war themed escape room, and it was fun and all, but I thought the only winning move when it came to nuclear war was not to play.
Tim, I think you're being super critical.
Welcome to another episode of the Super Critical Podcast, where we delve into the fun and oftentimes nonsensical way pop culture portrays nuclear weapons. My name is Tim Westmyer, someone who studies nuclear weapons and works on nuclear security for a living. For this episode, I decided to subject my coworkers to a team-building exercise in the only way that I know how. I locked them in a room to solve puzzles to stop World War III. Fortunately for everyone, I did not actually get my hands on weapons-grade plutonium and become my own real-life Bond villain. Instead, we went to an escape room near Washington, D.C. to play a room that is nuclear weapon themes, nuclear launch scenarios. We decided to test our mettle if our nuclear education background would help or hurt, just kind of see how that plays into it. Because my usual podcast host, Gabe, has yet to submit an application to join me at my work, we decided to let him sit this one out, but I'm excited to be joined again by my work colleague now, Will Saetren. Will, how you doing?
Thanks for having me back on the show, Tim.
It was fun, right? How did you enjoy the escape room?
I did. I enjoyed it a lot. I think both you and I can agree that the actual relevance of our expertise with nuclear weapons was a little bit lacking, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was good. We had about 10 people for the room. It was a mix of people who work pretty exclusively on nuclear security, maybe some of them have a background in nuclear weapons strategy, nuclear deterrence, Cold War history, and other people have less so, and they have different focuses and interests and things like that. So it was a good mix of people. So escape rooms. Will, now that you've done one of these before, I've done maybe one or two before, how would you describe an escape room to someone who is completely new to it? Because we had some new people playing it for the first time.
I would say the best way to describe it is it's just you get locked in a room and there are lots of puzzles and mysteries and clues that you essentially have to solve in order to go through the various steps that you need to get to the final key that will let you out of the escape room. And that was fun. I think that a lot of the puzzles were creative, were well thought out. We had advantages on some of them. For instance, one of our coworkers, Anna, is Russian, and one of the clues was based on Russian languages. And she was like, oh, immediately, this has to be a combination of one of the locks. And sure enough, it was. Yeah. So that was good.
It helped. We weren't really able to... we'll save this for the actual episode, whether or not our nuclear background helped. So here's a way for this format of the show to go. For this episode, I thought we would talk about our experiences in the escape room, whether it was fun or more or less accurate appropriation of nuclear weapons in the Cold War history, because that's where the time was set here, and ultimately whether or not it helped to have a background in nuclear policy to solve the puzzles. And I wish I could have had time to ask some of our friends, coworkers, whether or not it was fun to play a game like this with someone who are nuclear history, nuclear weapons policy enthusiasts like us, to be like, hey, that's actually not right. And then they would say, well, that doesn't help you solve the puzzle. So we'll see. So spoiler warning for this. I'm not going to name exactly where we went because I don't want to ruin any of the puzzles for people. I want people, if they're interested in this, to play this game, they can just go out and try it and have fun themselves. But, of course, if you have a Google, you know how to Google things, you can probably figure it out. So you can still do it if you want to. We're mostly going to talk about maybe not the solutions to the puzzles, but broadly some of the things that we thought was maybe appropriate for the nuclear history. We won't give any sort of clues away, but fair warning, in case we slip up and you're smarter than we were at figuring out what we're talking about. But yeah, so that I think we can still talk a little bit about what we experienced and whether or not we were appropriate to be super critical about it. So bunkers, nukes, and the Cold War, these really seem to be like very popular themes for escape rooms. I have just doing a quick Google search myself, was looking to see if there were any other ones, and I've got quite a bit here. So I think we'll go back and forth a little bit about some of the ones that are on here. Like the first one, for example, this is out in Chicago, Illinois. It was recommended to us on Twitter by Steven Schwartz, who's at Atomic Analyst, as well as Andy Adams of Outrider Foundation. which you can check out some of their really cool work if you go to outrider.com/nukes. They've got a really cool thing where you can spend your time on a Friday and plug in your zip code, and they'll launch a bomb and hit you, and you can actually see in a very stylized, very stylized and very detailed way about what the effects of that would be, to understand kind of why nuclear weapons are dangerous and what damage they would cause to you and yours in your area. So go check that out. But they recommended a place called The Last Offender at World of Escapes in Chicago, Illinois. And the theme for that one is the Elite Defenders team of Cold War operatives. You work as to undercover clues and solve puzzles in large and small teams. You have to make a choice about to save the world from nuclear war. And this one in particular looked pretty in-depth. Everybody's wearing jumpsuits. That would have been, we got to check that one out if we're ever in Chicago. But there's another one here called The Bunker Experience out in Pasadena, California, set in a post-apocalyptic sci-fi world. Complete the thrills and suspense in order to survive. So I think it's just stop the World War III, kind of another one of those scenarios. But this other one, the next one, Will, if you want to check this one out.
The Bunker, a Cold War era themed escape room in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So, the description is, a Cold War era retaliatory missile defense program has suddenly activated, and you are in the only facility capable of stopping it. The date is August 1st, 2009, and you are the first to arrive at your new military post inside a missile complex. And a sudden event inexplicably triggers a total lockdown of all doors and controls, and immediately initiates what appears to be an automated missile launch countdown.
Ooh.
Has the computer detected a real nuclear threat, or is the launch system malfunctioning? Can you stop the launch, prevent a global thermonuclear war, and retreat to the radiation-free safe zone before it's too late?
That one sounds fun. I kind of want to do that one. Jennifer, I don't know, can we, my wife's here in the room, can we go to Chattanooga, Tennessee real quick?
Probably not today.
Not today. All right, well, we'll get to it. Road trip. Another one here is called Cold War Crisis at American Escape Rooms in Orlando. It's right around the Cuban Missile Crisis. Tensions between nations brought on by the Cold War are unbearable. A renegade state agent is planning an attack that will plunge the world into nuclear war. And we're here to infiltrate the secret agent's base, defuse the bomb, and in less than 60 minutes, otherwise we face the worst. Humanity destroyed by nuclear Armageddon. Some of these are either like family-friendly, hey, we're going to solve something. Other ones are like, no, if you don't solve this, everyone's dead.
We're all going to die.
The other one escape room I've done in the past was, let's try to solve a puzzle Indiana Jones style to get like an idol, a golden idol. This one was, if you don't solve the puzzle, everyone you know and loved and everyone that could ever exist in the future are gone. Pretty serious stuff here. There's another one, we can keep going with these, but like one called Nuclear Countdown in Port City Escape in Wilmington, North Carolina. This one's interesting. You're diplomats in a bunker, American and Russian diplomats touring a command center that's about to actually start disarmament efforts. Like you're ready to like get rid of the bomb, but some sort of quote unquote nuclear activist has sabotaged the systems and activated the launch sequence. So you're supposed to disarm that. There's one in Manchester, New Hampshire. That's a fallout shelter at Granite State Escapes. And this one's actually a mobile escape room. So maybe they'll come down to D.C. But this nuclear war has already happened.
Wait, so is this escape room based on a TEL?
Perhaps. Well, this is interesting. This one, the war has already happened and the air is toxic. And you are trying to fix the oxygen ventilation system. So really, this is like, you failed at one of your previous games. Now you're stuck in this bunker because the war happened. Can you solve another puzzle, or are you going to be double screwed? So there's quite a number of these things. Let's talk a little bit about the one that we played today in the DC area. So what we played was a scenario that says that the Pentagon has some top secret information that a supply of Russian missiles armed with nuclear warheads soon will be launched at the United States. And we learn actually a number of countries. Our goal was to rescue a military officer who had important information on how to stop the launch. And if we win, we get to save millions, save ourselves, all that kind of good stuff. So let's get into this. So here we'll talk a little bit about like the puzzles that had nuclear relation piece to it, nuclear adjacent puzzles. Some of the imagery we saw, what the room was like, and then a little bit about what the end game was. But again, we're going to try our best to not give you any answers of the puzzle, just kind of the broad strokes of what we saw here. So let's go back and forth a little bit here. So The first thing I want to mention is that when you walk in the room, and you can see pictures of this on the internet, so this is nothing really spoily. You walk in the room, there's like a big metal table in the middle of the room. We see a gate off in the distance in the back of the room, and there's a guy, like a mannequin, look like a special forces dude, and he's all chained up. And we can't get to him yet. We need to get to him, and that's the person we need to save. But on the wall, on the far side, there's a big map. And it just looks like a regular 2D map that you would get at, like, a map store. And it had, from one location in Russia, like, strings, yarn strings, pointing to major cities. Like, what was it? One of them was DC, Anchorage.
Oslo, Norway.
Oslo, yeah, what happened to that?
Apparently, so I can sympathize with this. Also, I'm from Norway originally. I come from Bergen, and Oslo just isn't that great. So I don't think a lot of Norwegians would miss Oslo all that much.
Yeah, well, if they had one missile to go, Oslo is where it would hit.
Yeah, probably.
New Delhi was one of them. They had a couple of different places. So the Russians just appeared to be an all-out attack. I think I might have even seen some string, maybe in China or somewhere else.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't know.
And Alaska. Well, I mean, yeah. United States, Alaska, but yeah.
I will say also, none of them appear to be counterforce targeting. Meaning, like, I didn't see any going and hitting, like, Colorado, the Dakotas, any place where we would have our ICBMs. Louisiana, they weren't hitting sub bases, they weren't hitting bomber bases. Omaha Strategic Command wasn't being hit. It was just like a couple places like that.
Trying to trigger Armageddon.
This is where our nuclear experience and background, maybe I was trying to apply. I was looking at the map. I'm like, all right, so is this making it maybe a first strike? Is this a retaliatory strike? Is this a rogue general? Because all the bombs are coming from one location. It was a lot of things like that. I think I started to get down that path, and then I realized quickly it's not what mattered.
Yeah, it was pointless because, again, this is an attempt at bringing nuclear themes, like, from pop culture into a fun, family-friendly experience. And that's the problem with nuclear weapons. If you do get too much into the nitty-gritty of how the system works, it gets super depressing. And maybe that's not the best thing to tell your kid. Like, hey, you're probably going to die.
and someone didn't want to be like, oh, I'm in town from Seattle. And then they see Seattle is targeted.
Why?
I
wonder
feel
why.
like that. Yeah, so having people from, I don't know how many people from Anchorage, Alaska came to this part of town.
Probably not a lot. Maybe a few. Yeah.
So one thing I was a little disappointed on was that the string targets from wherever the bombs were coming from, the missiles, it looked like they were ICBMs we were talking about, but they didn't, when you're trying to describe where a missile is traveling, it's not in a straight line. It's like it's a trajectory path. He has to go through space. Maybe these were supersonic cruise missiles that just fly in a straight path or anything, but I don't know how you would describe it, but I've seen pictures of some of the other escape rooms that we're talking about earlier, and they actually have big electronic boards, like computer screens that look like in war games. Because that's what you would think. War games is something that people see a lot, where you see the big board, or the big board that's in Dr. Strangelove, or Failsafe.
Or War Games.
Any of those big boards.
I don't know exactly how to put this, sir, but are you aware of what a serious breach of security that would be? I mean, you'll see everything. You'll see the big board.
I was expecting something like that, and it was basically just a map with pins and yarn and stuff. So it worked. It was fine, but it was certainly a little bit maybe disappointing for someone like me, but maybe it didn't matter to our colleagues who weren't coming for that background, looking for that particular thing.
Yeah. And I think you're being a little bit super critical here, but no, I mean, and honestly, I think they were trying to achieve visually sort of the effect on the cheap, right? Without action, they were like, oh, we can take thumbtack, yarn, boom, problem solved. Instead of like, oh, we'll have to buy a TV here, right, to project like an image and to be accurate. I think they were just like, nah, this will do the trick, and
it worked.
It did.
It worked. Another thing in the room is where there were a couple barrels. Like, you would imagine a barrel that normally in an action movie will explode and fly up into the air. There were a bunch of green barrels, and there were a couple different signs on the side of them. One of them, for some reason, said radioactive barrel, and the next one to it said biohazard barrel. So I don't know, don't store those things in your bunker. This was supposed to be, I guess, like a command center thing. It was a little bit unclear whether or not this was a place you launched things from, whether it was like a local relay station, because there was a guy, the person we were trying to rescue was locked up there. Okay, it didn't really matter too much, but I was trying to get in my head in advance. Is this a fallout bunker? Is it a command launch facility bunker? Is it something? It wasn't entirely clear, and I think that was a little bit confusing to me for a while, why there was what the third thing is, which is there was like a big console with buttons. So why don't you describe this thing? Because this was probably the closest to right on the nose, right on the red button nose of nuclear themes. So why don't you talk about the console?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I've actually been to the only Titan II missile silo that is still around in the United States. It's a museum
out in Arizona, right?
It's out in Arizona, correct? And in there, they've kept everything exactly as it was while it was on the silo was hot, right? Like while it was on active duty.
And this is the one. If you listen to our podcast episode that we did about Star Trek First Contact, they were talking about a Titan missile site that's supposed to be in Montana, which is where they never stationed Titan missiles out in Montana. Captain Picard and Data and Lieutenant Riker walking around a missile and at the facility. They filmed actually at that museum.
There you go.
There. So you were there.
I was there, and actually, they also filmed Command and Control there. Yeah, that's where they got the footage of the Damascus incident. But anyways, I digress. Anyways, I was at that launch facility, and one of the striking similarities between this escape room was the way they laid out the console, where you kind of put in your. It was the final piece of the puzzle. This is where you got the key that would allow you to escape the room. And they laid it out. So it was this console with a bunch of buttons on it, and you kind of plugged in your keywords that you'd identified throughout the room. But on either side of the console were two lock boxes that you had to open up, right? So this was the visual representation of the two keys that you have to use on the actual consoles. Two launch operators, and they had them set, I think, 6 feet apart so that one person couldn't reach and operate both keys at the same time. You needed 2 people to turn the keys at the same time. And they had replicated that, so you'd open up the lock boxes and it would open up like a power source. And you'd hit a button and you'd activate that power source. If you did one, it wouldn't work. You had to get both of them. Then the console would activate. You could put in your keywords, and that would open up the little window that you needed to get the key to get out. And I thought that was kind of cool.
It was cool. I wish that they would have gone an extra step, which would be, instead of it being 2 keys that were padlocks that you open to push buttons, you would have had literally just 2 keys that you would have to actually have 2 people play at the same time and turn. And there would have been some kind of clue in it earlier. Maybe in one of we had these files that we would find every once in a while, like dossier files on kind of old 1980s James Bond villains who were various names like Vladimir or Dmitri, and you would maybe one of those things. It was designed a system that you need to turn 2 keys at the same time, so people know. That would have been cool. Maybe that's more of an engineering challenge, but I would have liked to have seen that and actually had that experience of turning 2 keys at the same time, because I didn't even know you had to push both buttons at the same time. Do you think we had to? Or did we just have to hit them one and then the other?
I think it was one and the other. It was definitely not 2 at the same time. And I don't think it's so much of an engineering challenge as it is a money challenge. Right?
Okay.
It's if you're looking at this from the operator of the escape rooms, we could do this and make it more accurate. But, how many nuke nerds are going to come and try to solve this room, right?
Any place in the world where there is a large grouping of nuke nerds, it's probably going to be the Washington, D.C. area.
Yes. 100%.
Save this for later. At the end of the episode, we're going to talk about how we would design our own nuclear escape room and what we would do to make this a little bit differently. But beyond that, I don't think there were a ton of other things that were appropriate to nuclear stuff in there. They mentioned missiles in one of the dossier documents, but that's kind of it. There was a couple of Russian, Soviet Union flags that were up there. There were a lot of padlocks and keys and things you would do with lights, and there was even a Morse code thing, which I'm really glad one of our people knew how to read Morse code. Not directly, but knew how to figure out those things. I've never been able to figure that out. Morse code is terrible for me, to try to solve one of those puzzles. So I'm glad someone else was able to do that. But that was kind of fun. What were some of the other things? Anything else that you want to mention about the room?
Yeah, no, I think so, and I mean, I without getting into the details of the actual like puzzles and challenges, that it was fun. Like I enjoyed it. It was mentally stimulating. Again, so we went with more of our colleagues than just Tim and myself. And it was kind of like a bonding experience. You felt like a sense of accomplishment, like, and we all kind of, because there were 10 of us in total, like everyone kind of like spread out around the room, and we were all working on like different puzzles at the same time.
At first, it was a little disorganized, which is something that we were disorganized at first. People jumping over each other, like, oh, I got something, and everyone's excited to find something. But then there was definitely that moment of like, let's stop for a second and figure out really what the different things we've assessed to mean. And having that big table in the middle of the room was really helpful for that. We were able to lay everything out. We all saw, I think everybody really got to contribute something pretty significant throughout this. I'm trying to think of everybody in our group all eventually solved one or two of the puzzles that we had to do.
Yeah. I think you're right. The one criticism I will have of that kind of like everyone did a little bit of everything and it being so disorganized was that like everything got kind of put on the table and we were like, oh, has this key been used yet? Like, has this puzzle like been solved? I guess there was this kind of like preconception that, oh, you've used an item once, right? And then you're done with it. But that wasn't the case, as we found out with everything.
Right.
Some things it was true, but some things it was not true.
And I think one of the things that you did that was really great was when you were done with a padlock and the key, leave the key in the padlock and put the padlock somewhere else. So it's not wondering, what does this key go for? We had that a couple times. What does this key go for? We don't know.
And that's exactly why I did that too. I was like, well, I need to show people that this key is done and we don't need to waste time on it.
We're doing some things that we probably didn't need to do. We were looking under drawers, taking drawers out. I accidentally took an entire drawer out from a desk and couldn't put it back, and I just put it down, and I said, guys, this is good. We don't need this. It's not this drawer. It's nothing we need.
We kept coming back to the wheels on that chair. Like, what is it with these wheels? This is something about these wheels. Oh, well, they're dirty. Like, literally, I heard that phrase used by multiple people at least 5 times.
And then it'd be like, is there something that says dirt somewhere that we need to use? But yeah, I don't think there's much else to talk about the room. I think we can do another one of these maybe if we ever decide to go to Chicago or Chattanooga and try to find another one. But I think for this one, that was kind of the extent of it, which I think is interesting given what we were looking for and the fact that it's advertised as a nuclear bunker, nuclear war themed game, that it wasn't a ton of that in there. Maybe we were the only ones, or maybe I'm the only one that was disappointed by that it didn't have a ton of those things, because the game itself was pretty fun. That's what we can get into now. So I think I have 4 discussion questions here for us to get through. This will be a relatively short episode. First, do you think that, quote, stopping a nuclear war or an accidental nuclear launch type scenario, why do you think that's seen as such a popular choice for escape room designers? And does it provide a good scenario for escape room players? Like, after you've gone through one of these, was this your first ever escape room?
It was, actually.
So, like, was this kind of an interesting scenario? People seem to go to it quite a lot. It could be simply a sample size thing where there are so many escape rooms out there now that there's every scenario you can possibly imagine. I'm sure there's a Friends TV show themed escape room.
Oh, there
somewhere.
is.
And if there isn't, let's do that.
Get right on that.
Why do you think it's so popular, and do you think it was a good scenario for people to play?
I do, and I mean, like, nuclear war, Armageddon, right? Like, the preservation of humanity. Like, it's, it's probably, like, the most noble thing there is, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think, it's popular. It's a good theme for escape rooms. It's a good theme for movies, right? Think about the movie Armageddon, right? Like, all of the nuclear-themed movies we have out there. Like, there are quite a number of them. I've seen a few of them.
Yeah,
I think there have been a couple of episodes that kind of focus on that theme. There's a very good reason that I think, nuclear... preventing Armageddon from happening is so popular, and I think that will be the case for many years to come.
You want an escape room where people can quickly know what the scenario is, know what their goal is, and have it be something that they can connect to. Now, stopping nuclear war is not the same thing as most people deal with on a day-to-day basis, but most escape rooms are something that places you in a scenario you're familiar with through something, through whether it's pop culture, like the one we did where it was... we did one that was the Indiana Jones Temple of Doom kind of scenario. Another one we did was Escape from Alcatraz. We did this one at Madame Tussauds in San Francisco, and it was Escape from Alcatraz. And it was, there were some issues with the puzzle that were very frustrating. Somebody forgot to put a key back, which was really difficult when one of the things we had to solve was a key, and we were locked in these 2 cells and couldn't figure out a way to get out. But it was a fun game to put yourself into that. There's Ghostbuster themed ones where you're trying to bust some ghosts and try to solve some puzzles about that. So I think it's fun, and it's definitely a strong connection to more like spy movies for the one that we played. The nuclear things, I think it was almost more like a James Bond room.
Specifically, GoldenEye.
Exactly. I would be surprised if there wasn't a pen that we had to click a few times and then throw it somewhere and then have it pop out. So that was fun. I think that was pretty cool. But maybe, I don't know, I'm wanting a little bit more because of it. I think part of it is because I had fun playing this game. I could see if it's just a little bit more there, it would tickle a different part of my brain, and not just the puzzle solving brain, but the nuclear war scenario themed brain. So I think it does make a good scenario for players to play. Literally, for some of the ones we talked about in the beginning of this episode, weapons are going to launch by this time. I like that. I think they should have added that into the game that we played. 60 minutes, the bombs are going. We need to get the person that we're trying to rescue out of the room by then. Otherwise, that's when it starts. The war will start then. The attack will start then, instead of our thing, which didn't really have a reason why the 60-minute timer was there.
Yeah.
One of the other ones we played was 60 minutes was the guard change at Alcatraz. So they would then know that we were there.
Right.
So I think games that have that as the reason for the end game is better than what we had, which maybe, am I not remembering what the 60 minutes was for?
It was just arbitrary.
Right. So having that into it would be really
yeah.
good. Especially because you got a darn counter going up there. Make it appropriate the general nuclear countdown thing that you tend to want to have.
And I'm just thinking of this, but it would also have been really cool, and this was something they could do on the cheap. Set the timer so that you score more points for various times. So for instance, instead of going to 60 minutes, you get to 45 minutes, and then it's all right, well, the missiles launch at this point. Mm-hmm. But if you do it in the next 15 minutes, the early warning satellites will pick it up, and you will have enough time for missile defenses to trigger, right? So it'll only, the damage done to the United States homeland will only be 50% of what it would be if you take the entire 60 minutes.
I like this. This is great. This is going to start to preview a little bit about the game I have. All right, so the second question is, how accurate was the scenario? And we kind of touched on it a little bit. Did it seem to draw more from TV and movies or from real life history and scenarios? And one of the questions I have when I played this game was, did it seem like the reason the Russians wanted to attack the United States, was it an accidental launch, a terrorist group infiltrating, rogue general, or it seemed like it was more like we're just tired of our nonsense kind of thing. But those may have been in the dossiers, which I didn't have a chance to read. Did you read a little bit more of those?
So that was one of the things. It was a clue that didn't really make a lot of sense to me. So I read through all the dossiers multiple times, and I mean, it was just your typical James Bond villain dossiers.
Did it seem like it was a decision from the leadership of the Soviet Union,
the Politburo?
Yes. Did it seem like it was a decision from them, or was it a decision from these rogue generals?
It was a decision from anyone. The closest answer that I could get to from reading the dossiers, it was a rogue individual that decided to launch these things. It wasn't really clear.
Okay.
It was just it was a backstory that they did not put a lot of time and effort into. They were we just want to have this fun nuclear themed room with random ass barrels of radioactive stuff next to biohazard stuff, with some Soviet flags in the windows, with some Cyrillic writing in different places. Yeah.
I mean, it was fun, but it definitely didn't hit on all of those individual notes that it could. So this is a really hard question to talk about, what was it accurate? Because it didn't really try to be accurate, because it really didn't try to hit any of those particular notes at all. I mean, it was probably accurate to some of the clues that we could play like a spy movie, but it didn't seem to me the game wasn't designed, why were we using in one place a certain type of tool device to get access to hidden messages? Who wrote those hidden messages in this game? You know what I mean? Some of the other games that we played, the Indiana Jones one made sense because it was someone had built this to hide a clue.
Yeah.
Or the one we did with the escape room for Escape from Alcatraz. It was you trying to solve puzzles that someone had planned in Escape. and it all made sense. Like this one, it was like, who was doing all these things?
I mean, this wasn't built into the story at all, so this is like me filling in the gaps of a very not fulfilling story.
Yeah,
but
what's your fan fiction for this?
Perhaps it was the guy who we were trying to rescue had written these things down, like beforehand.
Or maybe it was someone who worked for one of the rogue generals that didn't want the launch to happen, and they were trying to something.
Yeah, right. Like to create like a back way out, like a fail safe,
a back channel.
A back channel,
spinnaker type thing. That could be good. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to write a few more details into your description notes or ahead of time, like on the website. There was like 2 sentences to describe what the scenario was. If they just had a little bit more on there, it doesn't have to be a lot. I don't need a full actual dossier briefing, but a full paragraph that had some more information like that. You're working with, rogue elements within the rogue elements. That kind of stuff would be helpful. So I don't really know what else to say about this one. It's just kind of weird to not get super critical about it because I don't really know what else the scenarios were. I mean, in terms of the console panel, and when you were done at the very end, it opened up a glass panel which had a red button, and the key for us to get out was wrapped around the red button. But what do you tend to think about red buttons on consoles, things that look like launch facilities? What would you tend to think that they do?
I'm gonna push this gosh darn button.
And what do you think happens?
Something usually goes boom, right? That's the association
exactly.
with button.
Either the missiles get launched, and it's one of those like red button joke scenarios, or it could be potentially something like a Tom Cruise movie, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, where he hits a big red button at the last second to disarm a bomb that was about to hit San Francisco. I don't think that button did anything.
It didn't. And so, to your point, it would have been really cool if that button was actually the key and it opened the door. And that wouldn't, as somebody who is a fairly handy do-it-yourself kind of guy, all you need is, like, that button operates an electromagnet, like, on the door, right?
And unlocks the door.
And, that might have cost, like, the escape room people, like, knowing contractor rates and stuff, a couple $1,000 bucks. Mm-hmm. But they're charging, like, for a group of 10, it's a couple $100. So, that would have made the experience, like, if I was the Grandmaster and in charge of this escape room, I would have made that call, because I think it would have made the room just enough better to, like, warrant that kind of, like, advertising or bolstering of the experience.
Or at least it stopped a timer. Like, stopped a timer.
Yes, it stopped the countdown, which it did not do.
Spoiler alert lifted, we solved the puzzle. We had an hour to solve it, and we solved it with 18 minutes left. That's pretty good. I was incredibly surprised by how much 10 people were, 10 people helps. If people are smart and they figure out a puzzle, but 18 minutes was a lot of time. But we noticed we actually solved it with 18 minutes and 30 seconds left, but that red button didn't do anything. You had to get the key and open the door, and then a guy in the back room would push a button to stop the timer and stuff. So having a little bit of that would have been really cool. But that's kind of nitpicking, that we talked about the barrels. Yeah, why would you store nuclear waste in a room that whatever this was for, or biohazard waste? Also, if they're all green barrels, you can't really tell what stores one thing versus the other. Usually nuclear waste is the yellow
had
barrel.
Stickers on them, Tim. Come on.
Oh, okay, sorry, the stickers. But it did feel, I'll give them this, it looked like a Cold War bunker. Everything that was in there looked of the time period. Now, Cold War was a very long time period, but I would say like 50s, 60s. Like all of the desks looked like they were from that era. All of the chairs looked like they were from that era.
Yeah.
There was a
typewriter.
The typewriter looked really old. Like everything looked like it did back then. So my third question is, did it help at all to have an extra knowledge beyond what was in the room? Because they always say this. New escape rooms, they say you don't need to bring anything in there with you. No tools, no extra knowledge. Maybe just if you like Ghostbusters, then you'll understand what the things in the room do. But you don't really need to know that stuff. You'll learn it as you play. So did it help that we had that nuclear knowledge to bring in, or did maybe it actually kind of hurt?
I think maybe it might have hurt in some capacities because you were expecting to make connections that weren't actually there.
Like me with the map.
Right, like you with the map, but in other areas it did help, and it wasn't even related to nuclear, like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, right? Like Anna spoke Cyrillic, and she was like, "Oh, these are numbers. This is a combination to one of the padlocks," and sure enough, was the combination to one of the padlocks.
What I loved about that was like 2 puzzles later, we got the decoding,
the
Rosetta
clues.
Stone.
Yeah, and we were like, oh yeah, we already solved that. No big deal. Another one of the reasons I think that we solved this room and had like 18 and a half minutes left on the clock was that our coworker, Chris, literally guessed the combination to one of the locks. Just like, was like screwing around, messing with some numbers, and like, oh, sweet, this worked.
Yeah. How does that happen? And I immediately asked Chris after we were done, could he write down a few numbers for me for the lottery? And because if I can win the lottery, I can buy some pretty nice podcast equipment.
I will say this: the odds of getting the combo right for a padlock are 1 out of 999. I think your odds are a little bit more disparate than that when it comes to the lottery.
I have faith in Chris. I have faith in my friend Chris. That'll work out really good. Man, kind of beyond that, it was more just a keen eye, because we work so hard at our job trying to, manage the world of nuclear security risk and international security. And so we're always very detail-oriented, where we try to solve not just the problem in front of us, but also looking at a broader picture. Like, what's the problem we have and what may have caused it? What can be things that can happen in the future? We do a lot of things about like building budgets and trying to make connections between people. I think maybe some of that helped. So maybe those are all other factors that maybe are more important than bringing in a nuclear weapons degree background or working in a launch facility at some point in your life or touring one at a museum or something. But so the last question I have here is, what would we do if we were going to design our own escape room? Because I think what would be really fun would be the scenario is you're the president and the national security team. You appoint one person in the group as the president, and there's incoming attack. And you have 60 minutes. Really, it's 30 minutes, right? When missiles come from Russia to the United States. But let's say it's 60 minutes. Let's say it's bombers from a certain place or something. And you have to make a couple different decisions. And once that timer is out, everything's gone. And I guess the puzzle is to and someone has misplaced the nuclear football.
Right.
Some guy, one of the people who was handling the nuclear football, got drunk or was distracted by a movie and left it behind something that got locked. And you have to get to the nuclear football to launch your retaliatory strike. And then you have to do that based on a certain amount of time. So there's like 30 minutes for missiles to get here from Russia. You have like 10 minutes or so for it to break cloud cover and then see the missile. Then you have 5 minutes to wake the president. The president has 4 minutes to make a decision. It takes 4 minutes for the information to get to the launch officers who actually fire them.
Turn the keys.
All of that stuff. So you, as the president and the president's team, have to run through that entire process. So that serves a couple of functions. One, it serves just your pure, it would be kind of fun to be in this scenario. Two, it serves the function of teaching people how stressful this time is. You can make the game 30 minutes and just make it really hard and realize how oftentimes people fail and how stressful it is to make those decisions, which serves another function that I want in these kind of games, which is to not just be, it's a fun spy thing, but also, hey, nuclear weapons are pretty dangerous, and these are the kind of conditions that we work with when we try to handle them, and how close it is to make mistakes through this process. So would you play this game? Would this be a fun one that you'd like to play?
I would, and I would even go a little bit more elaborate than that. I would set it up so kind of like as you described it, like with benchmarks, right? So you have like 10 minutes to get the combination to the padlock that will give you access to the room where the like officer drunkenly misplaced the nuclear football. Once you have the football, then you're like, okay, great. I'm going to use like the biscuit now. And
where's the biscuit? Oh, it's in that code. It's over there.
Exactly.
Oh,
so you get another 5 minutes to unlock like the biscuit, right? To get to the codes. And so, you can take it step by step that way. And
I forgot the book of launch codes.
Yeah.
I don't know where that is. Yeah. Oh, it's over there.
Right. And then it's like, okay, so you're issuing the codes, but you're like, oh, wait, like, I'm not getting a response on the other line. Oh, like, this wire to my transponder is broken.
Yeah.
I have to, like, fix this. And in order to do that, you have to solve another puzzle, right? And, like, with each step along the way, there's room for failure. If you do not solve it within, like, the 10 minutes, the world's done, right? Everyone's toast. So if you solve it, you get to the next step, but, like, everything can be undone.
I like that. I also like escape rooms that have decision trees. So if you get to a certain point and you haven't solved it yet, that one path is gone. and now you have to move towards a different path. And they announce that, and that could be you have a little bit of time to stop the launch from happening at all, but that's a really hard clue to solve. And if you don't get that, then it's like, well, now you're screwed. Now you have to launch. You have to respond, and then you have to go through the rest of them. And then at the very last second, it's, okay, it's too late to launch, but you still have the ability to solve this last puzzle to get to your bunker. And if you get to your bunker, you at least survive.
Yeah.
And that would be kind of fun. Or to launch like a Star Wars space defense, missile defense, lasers, something along those lines. That would be super fun, and I think we could do pretty well with ourselves.
Yeah. And to your point, and have it be a point-based system, right? Like, so you make it to the bunker,
right.
But the world ends. Like, okay, great. Like, you get like 50% of the points that you could possibly get, right? You get to the bunker and you trigger the missile defense system that gives you another 20%. Like that. Yeah, I think that would be fun, and it would add a little extra oomph.
So it's too late, I think, to build this for the upcoming Carnegie Nuclear Policy Conference, which is in March. So 1 month from now. I think for the next
2
one...
2 weeks from now.
Yeah, so the next one, let's think about this. I think this would be really fun.
It's I feel like there's a room here where we could actually set up this kind of experience and advertise it and possibly get like some serious buy-in for something like that. So
I like this. So if anyone's listening to this and it's going to be at the Carnegie Conference, and this is the Carnegie Conference that's going to take place in 2019 in Washington, D.C., look for Will and I. Our pictures are out there on the world. You Google our names and you can find us and talk to us if you like this idea to be something to set up in the future. I think this would be really fun to do, or at least have some sort of web-based version of this. We could maybe do, I don't know how to set that up. I'd probably be better building actual props, things like that. All right, so that's all the questions I have. Anything else you want to bring up before we close out here?
No, I think we touched on everything. And like my last big thing that I wanted to talk about was how the button didn't operate the door, and that was right. So yeah.
I know, that button. You always complain in nuclear movies that there is a nuclear button at all, a red button, and it does either the thing that it should do or shouldn't do. This button just didn't do anything.
Yeah.
It was just like maybe there's some message there that it's not really about the button, Will. It's about everything else.
It's about the keys.
Yes.
It's about the keys.
There we go.
And they did have keys.
All right, so let's do our rating system, which we do every episode. We do a consistent 1 through 5 rating since we're going to be talking about things and we want to compare across all the different genres. But because we get super critical about the content, I get super critical about the rating. I've crunched the numbers here, and I think what we'll do is 1 out of 5 numbers on a padlock. One number won't get you anywhere. You only have one number, then you have to be like Chris and guess the rest of them. But if you have all 5 numbers, it will open up a world of possibilities and maybe even let you go home. How many out of 5 numbers on a padlock would you give the experience that we did at this unnamed escape room in the Washington, D.C. area?
I'd give it a solid 3 because it was fun. I enjoyed myself. I think the entire team had a good time. But again, like there were things there as somebody who works on these issues for a living that could have been done better. And also just quite frankly, like as we discussed, kind of like the benchmark system, I think even not having like a nuclear background would have made that like more like of a thriller.
Yeah, I would say 3 as well. I would have overall had a really fun time. It was really fun working with the colleagues that we had there. It was awesome to see everybody working together, solving pieces of the puzzle, bringing some of their own history and background into it, and their own expertise and their own ways of looking at things. That's fun, and that's what a good escape room will do. It's just, to get to a 5, just a little bit. You can get to a 4 for me so easily by just having a little bit more background information, a little bit more of the what are we doing here, and a little bit more of the complex clues. Although it did always advertise it as a 6 out of 10. I guess that was a 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
But a little bit more there. And maybe if we just didn't get lucky with people solving puzzles using their Russian language expertise or pure luck, it would have been a little bit different. But a 3, I think, is a pretty fair one. I have also some stuff here to recommend. We always usually do this on the podcast where if you like this kind of content, maybe you want to do your own escape room, you can either look at the ones if you're in one of the cities we mentioned earlier, or if you're not, there's some things I'd like to recommend. Maybe you have something, but I've got a few. 3 things here. 1, BGNlab. It's a channel on YouTube. It's a fun series by Scott Nicholson, who is a game designer at Wilfrid Laurier University in Ontario, Canada. They design games and teach games design for games that will save the world, quote unquote, is what they say. And they talk a lot about escape rooms. And they talk about what goes into a good escape room, what are some tips to solve escape rooms, but also just general game design, which is pretty fun. Second, if you go on Amazon or if you go on the internet and you look for Spin Master Games, they produce something called the Escape Room, the game, and you can buy your own escape room and play it at home. And one of the scenarios they have is something called Nuclear Countdown, where you can play it at home. It's a try to disarm a bomb puzzle, and they have a physical, it looks like a box with some keys and some numbers on it. I don't know really what it is, but it's some kind of bomb that you can disarm on a timer on your own. So if you want to play this game on your own, you'll look for it. I think it's actually kind of expensive because it might be out of print, but they probably can find a copy of it somewhere. And I might put it on my birthday wish list. We'll see. Maybe if I can get a copy of it, we'll play it and do another podcast episode.
That sounds great.
And finally, something that's easier to get to is a game that I have a ton of fun playing. It's called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. It's a VR game designed by Steel Crate. You play as a bomb disposal team. One person has headset on, or if you don't play the VR version, you have a computer screen where you see a bomb, and it has puzzles. And some of the puzzles are like wires, and certain numbers of wires and colors, and other ones have buttons that you have to push and things like that. And the other person, who's your teammate, has the bomb disposal guidebook. So they don't see the bomb, and you're telling them things like, how many wires does it have? Oh, it has blue, and it's 4 red, and things like that. And they have corresponding instructions to follow. It's a game that's about two things. One, how well you can read instructions. And two, how well you can communicate to someone else what you're seeing, which is a really hard skill to have.
Yeah.
And this game is very fun. You can get it on PlayStation VR, on the Galaxy Gear. You can just play it with two people that don't look at the same screen on a computer. You can print out the instructions. You can have them somewhere else. It's a lot of fun. I recommend people playing it. And I kind of wish there was a DLC content for disarming a nuclear bomb. One of these days, maybe I'll request that. That would be kind of fun.
Yeah. That sounds great.
Will, thanks so much for coming on the podcast again. You're becoming an ever increasingly popular return guest on the show. It helps that you sit a few desks for me, and I'd be like, hey, Will, what are you doing this weekend? But where can people find you if they want to find more of your wit and wisdom?
So I try to project my humor, my personality in my Twitter personality as well. So you can follow me at Will Saetren.
How would someone spell that?
WILLSAETREN.
Terrific. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Super Critical Podcast. If you have any suggestions for future episodes or want to tell us what we got wrong, either Nuke-wise or, hey, maybe we shouldn't be talking about escape room puzzles on the podcast and how wrong we are, there are a couple ways you can tell me that. You can go on our website, supercriticalpodcast.com, which has show resources and special features and all those kind of things about what went into preparing this episode. I'll link to some of the different places that we talked about. Go check that out on our website. We also have bonus features on our YouTube page. Our last episode that we did on 99 Luft balloons. After that, we produced on Spotify and YouTube a playlist of all the different songs people recommended to us. It's upwards of like 40 or 50 songs. If you are having a great day and you want to bring yourself down a little bit, or maybe it's raining and snowing outside and you just want to reflect the music that matches your mood, check out this nuclear weapons playlist. And also on Facebook, facebook.com/supercriticalpodcast. I'm on Twitter at Nuclear Podcast. And I also have an email account that I check, supercriticalpodcast@gmail.com. If you've enjoyed the program, we'd appreciate it if you would consider subscribing on iTunes or Google Play or wherever you listen to. Hey, and leave us a 5-star review. We haven't had one of those in a while. I know I don't even like to listen to my favorite podcasts and go on and do 5-star reviews, but it does help grow the show. Or at least tell one of your friends to go do one of these escape rooms, have them listen to the podcast. We always like that. It helps to grow the show, and it's super fun to hear how people end up coming to listen to the show. Until next time, this has been Tim Westmyer.
And Will Saetren.
And remember, if it's pop culture and radioactive, we are bound to get super critical about it. Have a good one.